Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with a special edition of We Talk News One-on-One. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Allison Benedict, founder of Pause Consumption in Phoenix, Arizona. Welcome, Allison, and thanks for joining me. How are you today?
Hi, Karen. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great today. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. It's my pleasure. So let's start with your relationship to the plant. Everyone has a cannabis story. Why don't you tell us yours?
My relationship with cannabis really started when I was in college. I had a really terrible accident where I broke my back in three places.
Yikes.
And it was my freshman year, and I was taking a very heavy course load, and I was a very dedicated academic. So I really didn't want to lighten my load. I wanted to be able to continue with my schooling. But the prescription medications that they gave me in my recovery didn't really allow me to continue to focus in my classes or during my study periods afterwards. So I was exploring other options, and I was very interested in plant medicine and alternatives to prescription drugs. And I stumbled upon cannabis. I had not been a cannabis consumer prior to that and even had some negative opinions about the plant at that time. And it completely opened up my eyes to the healing powers, how beneficial it was. And it really not only helped me with my recovery then, but it continues to help me with my pain management now, maybe 2 decades later at this point.
Wow. So was that a big step then, the first time you did try cannabis since you hadn't been a consumer prior?
Absolutely. I mean, it was uh, unlike anything I had experienced before, and just how connected I felt to my body and how great I could still manage my workload, still, manage my social calendar and feel a lot better just from this one plant. It was an incredible experience, and it really projected me in a new direction. I had prior to that really been on more of a pre-med kind of track in school, and I actually switched my major that year to a botany major, so plant sciences, and minor in chemistry at that point, and that's what I ended up finishing my degree with.
Wow. And then how did your studies in biology help you with, discovering the medicinal value and the many uses for the plant?
Really, I had an incredible privilege to work in a research lab at the college that I was attending, and I was able to enter into a laboratory environment running experiments and doing research, more ecological research, understanding how plants and sometimes animals were interacting in their natural habitats. But it just really gave me a chemical molecular perspective on the plant and why those benefits were happening. And it was an explanation to, oh, you're feeling like this because of this very scientific reason. It wasn't, magic or anything that couldn't be explained by scientific principles.
Sure, especially since, so much of people who had been prior consumers, it's anecdotal, whereas you got to actually see the scientific um, side of it.
Yeah.
So, so that led you to a career change.
Mhm.
And tell me a little bit about your early career and then how you've come to position yourself at the intersection of, and this is your quote, sustainability, political theory, and social justice. So why don't you talk a little bit about your early forays into the cannabis industry and then how that all led you to where you are now, and then we'll get into pause consumption.
Great. Yeah. After I finished my undergraduate, I went into a master's program that was based around political theory and sustainability. And it looked at sustainability and the political sphere through many different lenses. And I continued to look at that through the plant science and medicinal perspective. And really, that gave me a lot of information on things that I genuinely was not aware of before. How I know we've all heard like how laws are made, and we've done that in early education, but really thinking of how do you have political leverage? How do you lobby for changes? And how do you do that in a way that actually benefits the majority of people and not a myopic view of, the privileged minority there. So that's where I took my love of the plant side and my passion for social justice and political theory and sustainability. And cannabis really was a no brainer for me. It was early industry here in Arizona. We had passed legislation and started to see operations in the early 2010s into the, before 2015. I joined the industry in 2013, so very early medical days. And I used that experience from my education and my passions to really position me a little uniquely in the industry, that I was coming in again from this position of wanting to accelerate the industry forward, make it more professional, but still having that kind of pre-legalization experience
Kind of the
myself.
Wild West.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. And I loved it. And I still, appreciate where the industry is at even now, 10 years later. But that I was able to kind of combine all of my passions, combine all of this interest of mine, and apply it to the cannabis industry. And I have at this point done almost every job that is available in the industry. I started as a trimmer. That was my first actual paid position with, a FA card, as they call them. And I used my lab experience to get in on the extraction and infusion side. That was my first foray into product development, into brand development, and really seeing again, how do you make a business out of this plant, and how do you keep people safe? How do you ensure that there is a high expectation around consistency and quality? And that was from the very beginning that I was really thinking from that perspective. So, and then all it comes back to social justice, because access to alternative health options is a social justice topic. People being able to choose how they want to better themselves, how they want to treat themselves for ailments that they might be experiencing, and having to have that option to be able to go outside of the traditional, Western medicine, for example. So
Yeah.
that was early days. And yeah, now I've just kind of continued that experience into many different things, and it's all been incredibly an amazing ride, honestly.
Yeah, well, you're well known and well respected in cannabis circles, certainly in Arizona, and I'm sure nationally as well. Yeah, I always struggled with the government telling me what I could and could not do with the plant, and in the days before all these products were available, the general consumption method was smoking. And,
Right.
if you think about it, you're taking the leaves of a plant, rolling them in a paper and smoking them just like you would with tobacco. And so it's such a huge dichotomy between the cannabis plant. Yes, it's intoxicating, and
Mm-hmm.
tobacco, or at least most commercial tobacco, is not, but still,
Mm-hmm.
there just seemed to be it was a big stretch in my mind. Like, how come one plant's okay and another plant's not? Because alcohol is intoxicating, and that's
Right.
a huge issue in the industry too. It's like, well, alcohol is an intoxicant, so can't we just go through the whole, treat it like alcohol and tobacco?
I
So
completely agree. And I mean, alcohol is actually significantly more dangerous, both for your health and socially. So I don't see how that could be okay, but this other plant isn't. And honestly, if you look at the history, it actually is political motivations and why it's illegal, or and now has become more legalized.
yeah, it's very interesting when you dive into the what really happened to delegitimize the plant, and make the plant, both for consumers and as a business proposition, not palatable. Because it's a lot of it was politically motivated on both the hemp and intoxicating side of the plant.
Absolutely.
So I know you're a huge advocate for education, and I know that you do a lot of that at your pause consumption events, because I've attended several of them. So tell me what led you to start pause consumption. Tell me what it's about, what's in the name, the
Mm-hmm.
word pause, and why you organized it and what you do through pause consumption.
Yeah, I really started Pause for a few different reasons. One was to provide a space where people who, wherever they were in their journey with cannabis, either if they were just starting out or if they were an experienced consumer, they had a place to go that was really a judgment free zone, that you can come and show up as you are, wherever you are in your cannabis journey, and have a safe place to consume. The education part becomes incredibly important because as this plant becomes more readily available and socially acceptable, I think it's important that people understand how they are going to feel when they consume, or how they may feel when they consume. And having a safe place to go to have, especially that initial experience, I think is incredibly important. We have here in Arizona, for example, many dispensaries with great products, so many products that it could be really difficult to choose what's right for you. So even before you're ready to consume, you can come and learn more, find out maybe the consumption method that's going to be best for you, and then be able to come back and have that experience not alone in your house by yourself, but with people who can ensure that you're not over consuming or that you're not getting cross consumption, maybe trying too many different things at once, for example. And education in the moment while you're having that consumption experience is very different than when you are in a dispensary and you have a knowledgeable bud tender who is trying to talk you through some of these things. But how do you keep all of that information in your head when you're not familiar with it and then go home and try to have a positive experience? I think
Yeah,
that's why
remember
we
that when
hear,
you get home and what did he
you
say to
don't.
do? I forgot.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, do I quarter the gummy? Do I eat just like the head off of the gummy bear? None of that feels intuitive either. So the with so many different product types that can benefit people in so many different ways, this is a place to do that. And the reason that we called it pause is because there's this moment in between the thought and the action. And that is such a beautiful space, that 1 or 2 seconds in between doing something where you really do reconnect maybe with yourself or your environment. And that pause is such a game changer, honestly, in our lives, whether it's around cannabis consumption or not. Usually taking that extra beat in between taking that leap of action can really, change your whole trajectory. So I think there's something really powerful in that pause, the word, and then also the moment within your life as well. And especially because we are consuming cannabis and it is such a, moment for ourselves for so many people, and there's so much ritual around it for so many people. That is also our way to pause as well from the chaos and the expectations and the realities of the world. You can just really, take that pause and consume your cannabis responsibly and with great education provided.
Yeah, that's quite poignant and insightful. I love knowing what's behind company names, and that's a very interesting explanation, a very interesting uh, history of your brand name. So, what a lot of people don't know is that consumption is generally only allowed on private property. You can't walk down the street, smoke a joint, can't necessarily light up a cannabis cigarette where you would light up a regular cigarette. And I know that has a lot to do with what you're doing at Pause too, is educating on the legality of consumption as well as providing a place for responsible consumption, as you said. What can you tell me about the legalization, the normalization of consumption, why it's important, why you're an advocate for it, and what you expect to see in the future? Like I was just at a music venue and they had a smoking section that was for smoking anything, cigars, cigarettes, cannabis, whatever. And that was
Mm-hmm.
to try to keep people from smoking within the lawn seats or within the seats. It was an outdoor amphitheater. So in that regard, at least for that one event, was on a par with other smoking instruments. But tell me a
Yeah.
little more about
Yeah.
why the legalization and normalization of consumption is important and what you're doing about it and what needs to be done.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that people really don't realize because we do have so many robust, both medical and adult use programs all across the country. And so you can possess this product if you've acquired it legally through a dispensary, for example, but you cannot legally consume that product in most of these states that have adult use programs. And so with pause consumption, we are advocating for the legalization of consumption and providing places like they did at that concert where people can consume. Because what you'll find, especially with most cannabis consumers, is if you provide the guardrails of this is where you can do these things, we are happy to oblige. We don't necessarily want to be standing on the street looking over our shoulder wondering if we're about to get in trouble for doing what as adults should be allowed to do. And so there is, again, coming back to that political aspect of the work that we do, it's advocating with the right legislative bodies, with the legal system to legalize consumption, to be on par with possession. And it is absolutely a social issue as well and goes to our social justice roots because if you do not have private property or you cannot attend these private events where consumption is allowed, then you do not have somewhere where you can legally consume this product that you
Yeah,
have legally acquired.
yeah, legally consume a legal product. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I know in the Arizona legislature this session, this past session, there was a bill about landlord-tenant rights
Mm-hmm.
with
Right.
regards to cannabis, and then there was another one in the Arizona legislature about drugs in school zones. And it was
Mm-hmm.
very interesting that cannabis got included in the list of drugs because it was now a legal product in Arizona and shouldn't necessarily, in my opinion, at least the way the bill was worded, shouldn't necessarily been on that list. And, I think
Absolutely.
about my father. I mean, he's in a medical use only state and certainly not a huge proponent of cannabis in general, but open to listening. They built a junior high school right behind his neighborhood. Well, he was a homeowner before they built a junior high school. What
Mm-hmm.
happens in states like that? Like
Right.
if in Arizona you are legally purchasing and possessing a product, and then they build a school right behind a house that you bought, and now you're within that perimeter of
Right.
of a drug-free zone. Like what happens in that situation? What are people's options?
Honestly, not many. It's really difficult. And in that case, they might be grandfathered in. They might be able to have these legal leverage because they were a homeowner in that case. But if you are, let's say, for example, in that school zone and you're a renter, you have almost no rights at all. And that is a major problem because for a lot of people, this is not just a social thing that they're doing. They really are doing it for their health. It is a medical necessity for them. They've decided, and now they're implementing that into their life. And they're going to get in trouble in their own home or in the home that they're renting for possessing and consuming this product. And we do know that obviously it has a very pungent smell, and there are those things that if you're not a consumer, you might not want. And so, again, having consumption lounges, places where people can go, and there's the proper air handling, air quality control, and you're reducing the odor, then again, you have this center where people can go and they can do that legally and they can do it safely. And in Arizona, we have started to see consumption lounges popping up. There are a couple in Phoenix and one in Tucson, but they really are getting approval through the city. They're not approved or within a framework that is regulated like dispensaries are, for example. So that's a very gray area because while the city has approved it, there is no state level or certainly national level protections, even for those lounges that have been brave enough to open at this point. So, that's why we need to legalize and then create a framework of rules of engagement that we're all supposed to play by, keep everyone safe, give people these centers for safe consumption.
Yeah, and I know just from following some of the consumption lounge stories throughout the country, some of them are starting where you can drink cannabis drinks, but you can't necessarily smoke. You can eat cannabis foods, whether they're gummies or infused dishes. And so to me, sometimes it seems like a distinction without a difference.
It
If
is.
you're consuming, does it really matter if you're ingesting, inhaling, if you're doing a
Right.
topical? Could I go into a cannabis lounge and lather myself up with,
Good
a
Lord.
cannabis cream?
I would hope so.
So
Yeah.
what's behind that distinction, do you think? Like,
Honestly, it's a lack of education. I think people are afraid. In part, they don't know how to regulate it. They don't know what the rules should be. And the few states that have consumption lounge programs or have legalized social consumption, they're still figuring it out. And I would say there isn't one best model yet. I would certainly look to Nevada as a great um, model in a way because they have allowed you to be able to purchase cannabis there. They have a per person allotment. So again, we're keeping people safe and reducing overconsumption like possibilities. And all types of products are available. So it's not just drinks or other things. But I think some of where we've gone wrong with the programs that exist is you can't serve food, infused or non-infused, in some of these states. You can't serve drinks. So again, when we think of them as businesses as well, because they do need to be thought of as in a business sense, how are the ways that you're going to drive revenue from these programs? And if you can't sell food and drink and you can't sell product there, then you're essentially renting out a table for someone to come and bring their own stuff. None of that really actually makes a whole lot of sense.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, WNBA superstar and Olympic champion Brittany Griner gets busted at a Russian airport for carrying hash oil.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elena Pinto, and this is Weed Talk News.
Hey, everybody. It's Brandon Jones with Be Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Matthew Friedlander, coming to you from the owner's office here at Skagit Organics.
I'm Amy Carter from Michigan Weedsters.
My name's Tom. You can find me over at Cannabis and Legalization News.
I'm Jill Goldsberry with We Talk News New Jersey, and we are back.
Andrew Behringer here reporting from Washington, D.C.
Your Canadian correspondent with We Talk News, Debbie Fazy with the Canadian Toke of the Week.
I'm Doug Miller from Highland Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Weed Talk News.
Yeah, when you break it down, it doesn't.
It really doesn't. It does not. And it doesn't necessarily keep people safe either, because if you see consumption lounges as an extension of the current regulatory framework within that state, just like a dispensary is, then you have tested safe products that are available and and then you have a per person allotment, just like you would in a dispensary, then you know that that person isn't taking too much and the product itself is safe. If they're bringing it with them, you have absolutely no sense of where that product came from, if it has been tested at all, if it is safe, and then they're consuming it on your property under your eyesight, and then it becomes a liability for that consumption lounge owner. So again, to keep everyone safe and to build this into a true business opportunity, there has to be dispensing within the consumption lounges. It just has to be that way.
Yeah, to me, that makes way more sense than, like bringing my own, alcohol into a bar,
Exactly.
Like,
that doesn't make any sense at all. And if you think of like how successful a lot of the programs, adult use and medical programs are right now, they've done so much that they have infrastructure like grows and manufacturing facilities that are already built that could support these consumption lounges. And in some states, many of them have an excess of product that's available that the dispensaries aren't able to sell all through. And so you have things that are going to waste and have to be destroyed. And so much energy, when you think again from the sustainability standpoint, like you've invested all this time, energy, natural resources into making a product that never makes it to the end consumer because it expires. And so if you want to again, support the whole industry, support the infrastructure that's already been built. Consumption lounges are the natural next evolution.
Yeah, especially back to one of our original points, you've got a legally purchased and possessed product and nothing to do, nowhere to go with
Nowhere
it.
to go with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, you've got an event coming up. Pause Consumption's got an event coming up in mid-October. Why don't you tell us a little more about it?
Yeah, it's actually
Or
going to be
excuse
in
me,
August.
mid-August. Yes,
Yeah,
mid-August.
no, that's okay. August 15th. It is our POP event. It stands for Powering Our Potential, and it is a consumption networking event. Really bringing together people who might already be in the industry or those who are looking to break in, bring us together in a professional setting where we can network and consume. And it's the reason we did this as a consumption networking event is one, because we do support the industry and we want to support the talent and the people of the industry as well in their career goals and ambitions. But it is very important that we continue to infuse cannabis into the cannabis industry. I've again been doing this for about 10 years, and I can't even tell you how many business meetings I've been to where you're showing products, you're trying to look at maybe something you're trying to buy from another vendor, and you're sitting at a restaurant and you're again just waiting to be asked to leave because they're like, why do you have this here? And so there's nothing wrong with this plant. There's nothing unprofessional about the plant. And so when you bring it into this professional networking, it can start to lighten that and reduce the stigma that it has around it. So that's a reason why we do that.
Yeah, there does still seem to be a stigma outside of cannabis events of, pulling out a vape pen and taking a quick hit of it, which is really no different than taking a sip of a glass of wine or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it, like you said, is education. A lot of it is just increased exposure. And, for people who do consume publicly and professionally, we've got to be good advocates. I mean,
exactly.
you don't hear of bar fights breaking out after cannabis events, but I think, we've got to be responsible consumers to help open those avenues ourselves.
Agreed. And these events do help with that, by giving us a way to show that we can be responsible and that we can be professional. And if you talk to any security guard, they would rather work a cannabis event every day of the week than do something that's centered around alcohol because, like you said, no one is getting into a brawl over a joint. It just is never going to happen.
Yeah, for sure. Just a couple more questions. One, on the whole legalization front, are you a descheduler or a rescheduler? There seems to be two camps in the industry.
I do not think that cannabis should be a scheduled drug at all. I think that this half step of taking it from 3 to 1, I don't know what that really does to benefit the current industry or the future industry.
From 1 to 3, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think going from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 opens up a can of worms that's going to be worse for the industry than being on Schedule 1.
I do too. I think that the people who are going to enter into the industry when it does go to that level is not necessarily have the right intentions with the plant, would be my general perspective. I think if you want to make it into a pharmaceutical, then that is a far and away step from everything that we've done up to this point and is not I would say, honoring the plant as it was intended to be used.
Yeah, because you'll get a THC capsule, and it won't have any of the other cannabinoids or terpenes. You won't get the entourage effect. Might very well be synthetic, like the epidiol is synthetic, So I think
what we've seen from synthetics as well, Karen, is that they haven't had the best effects. People have gotten, if you're directly consuming something that is a compound directly from the plant, you do not see these adverse effects like you are seeing with synthetics. it is something that we really do not understand, and it is very dangerous. And I am not an advocate for that at all.
Yeah, I'm not either. And I don't think you know this. I went to a natural cooking school, and so I'm a big proponent of foods in their natural forms. You don't separate the yolk from the egg white, because they have a synergistic effect. And it's the same with the cannabis plant, and it's the same, whether you have a real maple flavor or a manufactured maple flavor, very big difference. So I'm not a big proponent of synthetic anything. And I think we're all better off with stuff in its most natural form. Last question. There's always a lot of reports about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the industry. And we know as an industry that minorities are typically way underrepresented, and social equity programs, while well-intended, have not necessarily done much to fill those gaps. But specifically, as a woman in cannabis, what challenges have you faced? What challenges do you see? MJ Biz's 2023 DEI report indicated that 39% of cannabis executives are women, which compared to other industries as a whole, that's really not too bad. Only 8 to 10% of S&P 500 women, CEOs are women, and only about 30% of senior managers across all industries, not even C-suite, only about 30% are women. So when you look at it, 39% of cannabis CEOs are women. That's not too bad, but only, I think it was, the latest report was 16% of cannabis business owners are women. So what challenges do you see or do you face as a woman in cannabis? Are there disadvantages to being a woman? I have found throughout my professional career, for every real and perceived advantage or real and perceived disadvantage there was to being a woman, there was also a real and perceived advantage. So I never let that stop me. And I worked in a highly technical field for 25 years.
Yeah, I don't see it really as a disadvantage at all. I mean, I am similar to you, Karen, in that I see it as a real advantage. And while 39% is certainly good for being at that C-suite level, like you said, on the ownership side, both for women and for minorities, it really is abysmal. And I think that that's where, as an industry, we should be looking to support women owners and minority owners. And one of the biggest challenges in that regard is really with funding. And getting funded as especially an entrepreneur that's just getting started, that is a real challenge. And a lot of it is a hangover. A lot of the stats that you see within ownership and within participation in the industry is a hangover from the war on drugs and the negative effect that it had within especially communities of color and women. The reason that as a whole, regardless of industry, we're not necessarily as represented in the higher ranks is because of that obligation that comes more with the home and family life. And for those of us like myself that do have, children and a family, do you have those obligations as well that men, honestly, even the best of them are not necessarily having that same level of pressure. But for me, I see that as a beautiful strength because you can be a dynamic leader, an empathetic leader, and be able to navigate so many different complexities because you have this experience of having, honestly, a lot on your plate. And being able to do that successfully, I think, is why you've seen inside and outside of the industry more and more female C-suite leaders be successful, is because they are leading in a different way. They are coming at it in a different manner. And not all women are like that, certainly. Just speaking more for myself, that's my way, is leading with my heart, but with a real strong business sense and a business acumen. And those two things together, especially when you consider being empathetic with people, whether they're your employees or your customers, creates a genuine connection that people want to buy into. And I think more and more people are looking for companies and for brands that truly are authentic in what they're doing, and they're vulnerable and genuine in their actions. And people are connecting with that more, and it's really showing in how shifting consumer behaviors are.
Yeah, I think there does seem to be a lot more attention being paid to resonating with what you're consuming, for people in general across industries, not just in cannabis, whether it's, sustainability is important to you, diversity, equity, inclusion, sourcing of materials, like whatever it is, people do seem to be using their purchasing power in more intentional ways. And I think that's good for all of consumption and all industries, not just cannabis.
Absolutely. I think let's raise the stakes for ourselves continuously.
Yeah, for sure. So what advice would you give to the canna curious? Like where should someone start?
I think really before you even walk into a dispensary or go to purchase a product or consume a product, do your research. We do have guides that we publish through Pause Consumption. They're free resources. We have a guide that shows around dosing for all different product categories, what an entry dose could look like, and how you should expect to feel based off of that product. So I think looking for those types of resources, really educating yourself. Then think about what are the effects that you're looking for? What are you solving for? Are you looking for something that's more social? Are you looking for pain? Are you looking to sleep better? And really check in with yourself before, again, you go to purchase that product. And be prepared when you go in and have your questions. Don't be afraid to write them down either. I think that that's something like nothing to be embarrassed of. And in fact, most just people who are working in a dispensary are so excited to help you and to help you find the right product. So coming in with that, a bit of education before you even get started. And then as you are wading into the waters, take it really slow. The advice that we always give at Pause is that you can always take more, you can't take less. And especially with certain consumption methods like edibles, the onset time is so much longer that you could accidentally overdose yourself and have a really negative experience. And so avoid all of that by just, low and slow, real easy, and really small doses, wherein you might be taking a 20 milligram of a Tylenol or something like that. That is not going to work for you the first time that you're consuming cannabis. So think, resources, education, come in prepared, and then take it really slow.
That's fantastic. And you said Pause Consumption publishes some of those guides. They can get those at pauseconsumption.com.
Yes, absolutely. We have our guides. You can just check out our resource page. We have even a deep dive once you're ready to learn more. Our latest guide is around beyond cannabinoids, talking about terpenes, ketones, aldehydes, and other parts of the plant that are making you really feel what you're feeling beyond just the indica sativa hybrid denominations that you can get at a surface level.
That's fantastic. And let's get a plug in for your event again, the August 15th event. Where can people buy tickets? Where is the event?
You can buy tickets on our website, Pause Consumption Lounge. You can also find us through Instagram, and that will link to our tickets as well. That's Pause Consumption. And August 15th, it's going to be from 5:30 to 8 in downtown Phoenix at the Plant Body Soul headquarters.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Allison, for this special edition of Weed Talk News One-on-One. Allison Benedict, founder of Pause Consumption, everybody. If you're in Phoenix, see if she's got an event going on. And if you're a Canna Curious consumer, certainly check out her educational guides at pauseconsumption.com. Thank you, Allison. Have a great weekend.
Thank you so much, Karen.